First off, my thoughts and prayers are with you and with all the faithfuls as we see the West is quickly moving from a post-Christian world into an anti-Christian one. So take me back to that day over the weekend when you see the health inspectors and the cops interrupting your Passover service. What was going through your mind?
I was absolutely shocked. This craziness started 30 months ago when the COVID hit, and I started to have police officers at my services outside. I feed the homeless people on the streets of Calgary 4 times a week. But this was the first time that they dared to enter a church building. I pastor two churches. One is on the streets that feeds the poor, and another one is in the building. I was the first pastor that received the COVID ticket, $1,200 for feeding the poor. And I was told that feeding the poor is unacceptable right now. And since then, I got 28 tickets. So I was accustomed to dealing with authorities, talking to the police. But this was the first time that they dared to enter in the middle of service. I was absolutely shaken. And you can tell by listening to my voice on the video, my hands were shaken, my voice was shaken. How dare you? The audacity to disrupt our most holy day in a year, Passover celebration during Shabbat. I was shocked. When I saw them, I couldn't believe it. For a second, I thought like, no, this is not happening. This is not real. I grabbed my telephone and I started to record, and the rest is the history.
And so here you are actually doing God's work, feeding his people during a time for many people. It's been very hard economically and, of course, for many people medically as well. And here you are doing God's work, and yet the state is coming down on you for it. And I know you've mentioned before that when you spoke to law enforcement officers before, as you mentioned, this has been over a year now in the making, that you said that you would even put time aside for them to come in and to look around. But you didn't want them to come, fully armed during the middle of service, and yet they came anyways. And you've also mentioned that they've come before where they blocked off the driveways. Do you think this was an intimidation tactic, that they purposely didn't come and meet with you quietly, that they came instead during the middle of service?
Absolutely. Those tactics are intimidation tactics, harassment. That's why I call them, I have been criticized for using a very strong language, Nazi, Gestapo, SS, communism, fascism. But you got to remember, I grew up in Poland behind the Iron Curtain. I've seen what the police is capable of when there is corruption. During communism and socialism, there was no laws. Police could beat you up, torture, arrest, shoot, and no one would know where you are buried. I grew up in a country where my grandparents were telling me stories about SS, about Gestapo, raping. My grandma was hiding under a mattress, and on top was an SS officer raping another girl. I've heard all those stories. I grew up in Poland. So Adolf Hitler did not come to power in 1939. He came to power over a decade before. This was in a making for a long time, fascism and Nazism. So what I'm seeing right now is the same tactics, the same intimidation, take it, submit, or else we will come, we will harass you people, and we will not even respect the church. Let me just give you a little bit of history. Even during the Middle Ages, the darkest place, right, the darkest times of history, when the people were burned on the stakes, the soldiers, the warriors, the knights were not allowed to enter synagogue or church or a cathedral. They had to leave their weapons outside. And here I am in a 21st century in a free and democratic society, and police absolutely doesn't care about anything. They came to enforce a bylaw, but do you know, by doing this, they have broken two criminal offenses punishable with 5 years mandatory jail time, interfering with the clergyman while he's conducting his duty and interfering with the church service. 5 years mandatory jail time.
So here they are, as you're mentioning, they're in the wrong legally as well. But during this whole time that you're in this confrontation with them, were you afraid that you were going to be arrested?
I have been arrested before a dozen times. I stood over 100 times before different courts. I have about 300 citations so far. So I guess if I was to be arrested, I was to be arrested. But as a clergyman, as a shepherd of God's people, I couldn't act any different way. They intruded into our space, the sanctuary. This is a holy place. This is our auditorium. This is where we come to pray. free of this craziness outside of the world, and they intruded on that, and they broke every rule that you can possibly break. If I was to be arrested that day, so be it, but I would do it again. And if they will dare to come back again, I'm going to do it again.